We're in the second week of the new study year on the workshops, and we're extremely lucky to have on this new podcast season, we're extremely lucky to have as our first guest, Ms. Yadzia Williams. Thank you so much for your time and agreeing to do this interview with us.
I'm really happy to be here. I am every year that I come to this. I'm really happy to be here. It's for me, it's a sort of a pleasure and a privilege to come and teach within a different culture and with another set of young people. They're like little seeds that you're waiting to grow, you know, and you're a part of that. So that's really, really nice.
And we're extremely lucky to be able to work with you and to have such a professional teach us about things year after year. I would like to start by asking you, what is the workshop this year about?
The workshop every year is about understanding that design thinking process. Because students come from schools, they come from very different places where their experience is varied. And I suppose in any art college, you're trying to give them a similar experience to work from. And the design process is a really important process because it's a process that designers, not just in art and design, but across all disciplines in architecture, in music, in dance use, in order to allow them to think out of that box, to be more creative, to come up with ideas that aren't the norm, to come up with original ideas rather than preconceived ideas that you might have in your head. So this particular workshop on a particular theme in social design is very much to get them to understand that process.
Thank you for the brief introduction. Seeing what the students are doing, I couldn't agree more with you. Fascinating to see them get these baby steps into understanding what the creative process is. But now I'd like to ask about you a little bit, just the way you feel comfortable to introduce yourself to the viewers.
Myself as an image maker, a designer, an illustrator, working in that creative field, I see myself as an image maker in my own right, but I work through the medium of printmaking. But over the last 10 years, I became very passionate about making handmade books because I used to work on I still do work on a program that is writing and illustrating for children's books. I started to question what is a book. You know, and a book is just not a cover and paper. It can be lots of different things. So I did a lot of research into that and then started to realize that the book was very important to me. And it wasn't just what goes into the book, but the whole book as itself to tell that narrative. So I suppose as an illustrator, I'm a narrator. I love to tell stories. And that's where I've sort of developed my skills. I think all these students here will find, like myself, that when you leave art college, you leave with certain skills. But as you develop and mature and you experience travel and everything else that is a part of your life, that then frames and that then forms where you start to decide to go as the artist that you are, the designer that you are. So my journey over 50 odd years, because I've been in education now for 45 years or more, is very much how I see myself as an artist and develop my own practice. But it's also about how I put that practice and my lifelong learning into education and into trying to give that knowledge to the students that are just starting out.
I see that as an educator, you love the idea of passing the knowledge to the students and working with the first-year students that are just starting their work in Polish-Japanese. What do you see on these first weeks in them developing? What in this process of them learning excites you the most?
I think we were talking about this at breakfast with some of the other lecturers I've been working with and I work with on this particular week. I think you start the first day and you see, you know, a group of 40 students in a group, because there was 105 students in this year. And you can see that they're nervous, they're very, they've already had a lot of information put into their heads from the morning sessions, and they don't know what to expect. And sort of we don't know what to expect neither, because we don't know how they're going to be developing. But it was great because they're all very tentative. And I think for me, what worked this year in particular for me, was that I was trying through this process, not for them just to understand the process and experience it and work with it so they could see the benefits of it, but also, I think more than anything else, the way technology is going, I was trying to also make them realize that they have to also work through analog in certain things. And what inspired me most of all when we got to day 3 was they took that on board. And they actually brought back into the studio paintbrushes, crayons, pencils, and they saw the significance of, if I try it in analog and then try it in the computer, I'm understanding how that might look different and how maybe this is a better solution than just going straight to your computer. So, funnily enough, every group worked in analog for a big part of the process, especially when they were having to design like lots of little figures that were going to fit into an image. They would draw them all out first, correct them, get them all the same size, get the feel, you know, get the poses, and then they would sort of pass it on to the person that was dropping them into the computer, because he probably had more skills in doing that at the moment, because their skills are still limited in Photoshop and Illustrator and whatever else they use. So I think that was what this workshop in particular made me feel good, because I thought, yes. And when I asked them, how did you feel when we made you work with natural traditional materials? They all said, I can see the benefits of how the thinking and the creativity can happen quicker. And then we could also see that the computer just becomes the tool that binds that. It's like making a piece of bread, a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, and then the oven is the tool that bakes it all and makes it great. So yeah, I found this workshop really good for that.
And I would like to add, I completely agree with you, because as someone who while working in the university, got to understand and appreciate the traditional media more, and to see how the workflow changes when you allow yourself to work with analog tools. Well, you kind of already said it, but if you could expand on why do you feel like this is significant for artists nowadays to keep working with analog media? And for example, you, when you're illustrating for books, I bet you love to have the book physically in person after it's done. So what is it about the analog that makes you excited?
I think with the analog, it's finding that material, because analog isn't just about using it for quicker design development. It's about communication. So if you're working with an art director, if you're working with somebody, or if somebody says, what's your idea for this? For me, if I was the art director, somebody who comes to me and says, well, look, I was thinking something like this with maybe this, and it's drawn in seconds, and all of a sudden, it's a very different communication. If we were doing this on Zoom, and you were in one place and I was in the other, our conversation would be very different. The fact that it's somehow in that time and you're communicating in a very different way, it develops a very different experience, but also it strengthens, I think, the students or the people that are working in that way. But also, I think analog for me is that you can explore the various traditional tools that are out there. How does a student know whether they could work through the form of printmaking, either with lino or with collagraphs or with paint, until they try it? But also, for me, technology is great, but if I'm asking a student to work in watercolor, or if a student likes working in watercolor, and all they do is pick up a tablet, go onto the watercolor app or whatever it is on the computer, get their brushes and paint, not having that knowledge of what watercolor can actually do as a traditional tool means that you're always guessing. You're not knowledgeable enough to know what that tool can do as a traditional tool to be able then to work the computer in a much more effective way. And I think that's the way with any drawing tools, that the computer can mimic, but it can't do something that replaces the human hand, the pressure you put on something, the way you draw with a pencil, but all of a sudden you make it heavier, the way it's different, it's completely different. And for me, I'm not against technology. People think I am. I'm not, because I don't work that way. But I'm a great believer that if students understand in traditional terms what that medium can do, but they choose to adapt it to the computer, they'll be better image makers, because it's that knowledge and understanding that you have. It's a bit like, I always say to students, you can't draw something simply, and I use a wheelbarrow, let's say, wheelbarrow. If you want to draw a wheelbarrow and you want to just draw it in a few lines, you really can't do it convincingly within a few lines if you haven't studied drawing a wheelbarrow with intense, really looking at it, looking around, drawing it quite accurate, seeing how the wheel fits onto the bracket, looking at how the handles are molded in. Once you understand that, then you know which bits are important and which bits you can leave in and which bits you can take away to make it still look like a wheelbarrow.
I agree with you, and I would say that younger students underappreciate the research, the power of research, and it is essential. So we wanted to try to do a new segment for the interviews. We want to discuss some of the work that students have been doing during the workshop week, and we have the amazing results, and we will overlay them, so we'd be able to see them while we talk about them. So here's the first illustration with the maze.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to understand they're not working individually, and usually editorial illustration, you'd be working on your own. They found that quite frustrating because some students thought, but I wanted my idea, and the others were going, yeah, but it's a group. You have to work together, and there's too many of you. So this one was one of the groups, and their article is "What's the Matter with Men?" And it was an issue about how men seem to be receding back in schools, with work. There's men who literally don't want to leave the house, they just want to play on computer games. There's men who only want to do a basic job. There's men who commit suicide because they don't talk enough to each other like women do, whereas we talk, to each other. So we get rid of our frustrations by communication. So this was one of the ideas. This group did 2 ideas. So they had 2 pieces in those 4 days. So their idea was that life for men is like a maze. So getting from A to B, which is coming in and getting a job, making your way to the top and success, is a bit like a maze, that it's not easy, but the ones who really want to do it will get there. But some men don't ever even enter the maze because they're not interested. Some men, really interesting, some men get lost in life, and they either commit suicide or they're just stuck in a rut. But the women seem to be able to manage the maze and get to the top, and that there's more women getting there than men. So that was the concept.
This is a beautiful illustration as well. I love the simplicity. I
Yeah,
like how
yeah.
it highlights some things like the figure sitting
Yes,
inside,
yeah.
hiding inside
Yeah,
in
yeah.
isolation.
But this is a good example of the figures being done by analogue drawn. So they made little paper cutouts so they could bend the figures to get the sort of different shapes of depression, of, you know, sitting down or banging their heads against a wall. So as a group, they worked really well. And then they then put it together, and the lad that did the maze is the one that was more competent at the moment on that. But it was all, you know, everybody talked at every stage. When they got to every stage, they'd go, maybe a little bit more here, maybe we need to have more pink people there because the women are more successful or whatever, you know. Maybe we need to group them more so they feel like it's not just dotted around, because then they have to think about the composition. So I think a very successful
Very
piece.
successful one, yeah. This is the next one that we have with the meat grinder.
This was really challenging. This was, am I rootless or am I free? Third culture kids like me make it up as we go along. And this was an article about, and I could fit into that because I was born in Wales but lived in a Polish culture. My father was Polish, my mum was Czech, but I'm Welsh. And so I have this problem of which is my culture, or is it all of them? And am I richer for the fact that it's all of them? And do I mind if I don't have a root that says I'm Polish, or I'm, you know, Polish and Czech, or I'm Czech, or I'm Welsh? So their idea was that they had a mincer, and in a mincer you put the stuff in, you know, mincer, you put your sausage, you put your potatoes, you mince it and sausage comes out, something comes out. So they sort of wanted to use elements of the mincer to show that it was a machine that sort of, you put lots of things in. Yeah. But they wanted this to be, you could see through it. So the idea was all the different letters from different cultures would go into the machine, they'd feed through, and eventually you would be created as maybe a combination of a couple or 3 or 4 or just one. And they then sort of streamed it out to have words, because there was letters in there, and little very simple, almost, are they figures, are they not figures in creating?
But it's beautiful and it's analog. It's analog in a lot of ways.
And that is
so
completely
beautiful. Yeah.
The only thing that isn't analog is the text.
Screens.
That is collage, they're glued on, and the background is a computer. So this is where, for me, analog and technology work.
I think the result
and I don't think you'd have got that on the computer on its own.
It would be much more difficult, and it would make more time.
It would take a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, this
Next
was another.
This is abstract.
I'm quite impressed with these because I think they look really good.
When I saw it, I was, whoa, this is a really.
This is again, what's the matter with men? And their idea is that when they read the article, it's about how you get from here, from school, and how you achieve, and where along the way you fall down. So this one in particular, so this is a staircase. So these are all the men are in the triangles because I said to them, think differently. Do you have to always have a male and female figure? Because actually, you don't. Is there any other way you can represent a male? This is where research comes in. I said, go away. And they went, I said, where do you go at least once a day? And they looked at me and I went, where do you go once a day at least? And they go, toilet. And I went, the toilet. Oh, yeah. And I said, what are the symbols if you go to a restaurant on the toilet doors? The most obvious one is the triangle. I said, you research, you can probably find lots of different ones. But the one that maybe most people know is these. So they then decided to use the simple triangle for male-ish genders and the thingy. So here are all the people, and there's more men than women, that are either these here don't want to go anywhere. They're the ones that play on their computers. They're deciding whether they want to go or don't want to go. They're at different stages of where they are in their lives, but when they get to here, this is where they achieve. But you can see there's more women that are achieving at the moment than men.
We will discuss the idea, and this illustration, it delivers the message so clearly, and it's so beautiful
And
again,
powerful.
and the analog textures,
Yeah.
the colors,
Yeah.
the shadows,
Yeah.
it works perfectly for.
They actually made that staircase three-dimensionally. They made all the balls,
So
they cut them
amazing.
out, so they played with it. They've got a three-dimensional structure that they did first in analog before they took it into computers.
Beautiful work, beautiful work. And the last one we have to discuss
Right.
is this one.
This one is, am I rootless, or am I free? Third culture kids like me make it up as we go along. Their idea was that this article was where is home? The root, you know, home is where you're rooted. So they decided to play with the word home. They decided that the bird represented freedom, because the article talks about the freedom to choose and travel and be a part of more than one culture. So the bird represented the freedom, but reversed out, it also created the E. So when you read you know it's home, because even though it's not that way. And the chameleon in the O represents that a chameleon can adapt and change to any situation.
This is such a smart use of the typography here. Yeah. It is a gorgeous illustration, and I like that it takes a different approach and
Very
works on the
different.
text and embeds the illustration.
And what
the
I was
vision.
very impressed with is that we had 2 articles. 3 of the groups did the men one, the one about men, and the other one did the ones that, and the other 2 did the rootless ones. They were all completely different.
This is the
but
best
you know,
part.
every one of them worked with analog.
It shows. It shows
and
with the.
then they went
Yeah.
into, using the computer to illustrate.
And we
the
got
thing.
these gorgeous results from
Thank
the
you.
workshops.
I was really pleased with them.
But thank you for conducting it
Oh,
and making
you're
it
welcome,
happen
you're
with
welcome,
students.
you're
This is
welcome.
awesome. And thanks to students for their work. They
Yeah.
did so amazing.
And
yeah.
I, you know, they were so happy when they left the room and they finally did it. They were like high on something. You know, it was all of a sudden, from being really struggling in the 3 days to all of a sudden they were just, we've done
This
it.
is, yeah.
And I said, yeah, and you've done a brilliant job.
To me, this
You've
is
done
the-
a really good job.
This is an indicator of a great workshop when, by the end, you realize that in a week you were able to achieve something
Yeah.
spectacular in a way
I
result.
think as an educator, you're always questioning whether you're doing the right things, you know, and you're also always finding new ways of trying to do something that will maybe give them a better experience. But I think when they come away satisfied, when they can see that it works, that the process works, and that working with analog and technology is going to work for them, then I'm satisfied that the workshop has achieved what it was meant to achieve.
You mentioned that you've been conducting these workshops for some time, so I would
Yes,
like
quite a few
to
years.
so I'd like to ask you about how did you get to conduct them even? How did you get in PJAIT here?
I think it's a very long history. I've known it was by chance. You know, I'm a great believer in fate. And I think in our lives, things happen, and they happen for a reason. And I often say this to Eva, and I say, we met by chance through Białowieża. There was a college there, and she worked there. And she was sent to us to understand the way we taught art and design. She didn't work here. This was nothing to do with her in those days. And when we met, you know how sometimes you meet somebody and you just know. You just know it. You just know.
You click.
You have some sort of chord that joins you. And that's exactly what it was. We just knew that we were like kindred spirits, you know? We knew that we could work together. And it was from then on, really. I asked about where was illustration in Poland, because obviously I was born into a Polish culture in Britain, but never had any idea of where illustration was going. And she said, just come over for an Erasmus. And that's how it started. And then she started to get me in to do workshops and things. And then this workshop started, so she got me in to do this. And do the so I've done this design process now for probably 15 years every year. And it doesn't change, because that's the nice thing, is the process doesn't change. But I often say to her, I wonder what would have happened to us if we'd not met. You know, and that's where I see fate. Because I said, you know, maybe we were meant to meet in order for you to be doing this, in order for me to be coming here. And we often talk about, if we'd never met, where would we be now? And would the students that we taught not be where they are now as well? So I'm a great believer in that.
I was about to say that it actually is so wonderful that you got to teach all of those things, all of those generations of students, and this base knowledge that you provide is useful for the entire life and career.
For the rest of their life.
Even out of the design industry specifically, because this idea of researching and this ideas of analog media are really important. Yeah. With that, I would like to ask you about your idea and vision of creative process. Just to know, what do you see the creative process is?
I think for me, that creative process is, the problem we have as people, as individuals, is we can only rely on our own experiences and our own lives. So that's the information that we have, but it's very limited because it's only what you know. So the creative process for me is for people to understand that in order to be able to think differently, you have to almost put your brain in a very different way of thinking. You know, your mind has got to work differently. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. You have to train it to do that. Because we really just, as I say in the process, we already have a mindset to everything that we do, because that's how human beings live. You know, we know what to do every morning because we've learnt that, and it doesn't change. We know how to make a cup of tea, you know, because we've learnt it. So how do we get the mind to think more than just what we already know how to do? You know, to push our thinking, to be questioning all the time. And that's what, for me, the design process is. The first start of it is you starting to think about what if, or what if I do this, or what if I do that. It's not about following a path. It's having that curiosity. So for me, the design process is like a curiosity, a sort of a, but there's got to be something else. So how do I find it? And pushing yourself to do that. So that sort of research, taking it into then how you think, and then bringing it back into research if you can't get enough idea. It's understanding that, you know, it's a process that, how can I put it, that allows you to sort of make these connections and maybe just think crazily, you know, and it's an opportunity where I say to students, you know what, your first mind map is bonkers. It's like crazy ideas that come into your head. But those crazy ideas are often the best ideas if they can be developed. And I think people are afraid to put crazy ideas down. They just put ideas down that they think are safe.
And not only that, I wanted to add that a lot of the times people would only put the safest ideas, and they would emit the bad, what they think the bad one is, and they would be too scared to get rejected and repeat the process.
And I think it's making them safe on a course to say, I'm not going to laugh at you, I'm not going to criticize you, I'm not going to make you feel embarrassed if you put something that makes me laugh, or put something that I think, right, I need this explained a little bit more. That's what the process is about, you know. And it's about, like you said, not rejecting things in your head. And that, for me, is where the process of doing the mind maps and the little doodles is important, because your ideas in your head are very fleeting. They come and they go.
Absolutely.
And if you're only using a computer all the time and not the paper, it's gone before you can open your computer, plug it in, get it to where you want it. Here, you get a paper, and straight away, it's like, I might have to write a bit, because I can't quite visualize it, but I know it's there. But I might do a little doodle, write a little bit so I can go back to it. And it's getting them to have fun. I think that's what I see the creative process is, having fun. and being surprised yourself when at the end of it, you think, wow, did I come up with that idea? Did I really think that way? You know, have I really created this? That, you know, and often students say to me, that's really clever, that I like this illustrator. I think he thinks in a very clever way. And I don't think I'll be able to do that. But that you can all do it. But it's not going to just happen in your head one day. You're not going to wake up and say, wow, I'm a great imaginative illustrator. I've got great... You have to work at it. It's like anything. It's a process. It's that sort of connection, that sort of having those ideas there. So for me, it's a very important process. And I think you can even adapt it to anything. Like I said, it can be adapted to any, even to your lifestyle. Even to the way you think in your lifestyle. And not rejecting things in your head. That's important.
Yeah. And I think what also is important, we mentioned this, that younger artists in general are afraid of criticism. And this is not about putting someone down, it's about providing alternative view and expanding the ideas.
And also the process comes with debate. It comes with, it doesn't come with, I've done this is wrong, this is right. I've done it. It's about evaluation. It's about analysing things. It's about looking at what you've done and thinking, well, why is that better than that? You can only do that if you have lots of ideas. But if you reject things in your head and only put down the things that you think are going to work, your lack of experience isn't going to help. But if you put lots of things down, even the craziest, somebody will come along, a member of staff or an art director, and he'll see potential in something that you've not seen. But if it's not there, they're not going to see it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this. I would like to close up by asking, because we talked about the technology quite a lot, and we cannot deny that it is going absolutely crazy. With the development of the artificial intelligence and things. What would be your advice to younger designers, artists, illustrators, those who want to find themselves in the field, but they're doing only the first steps?
I mean, I can only talk from the point of view of an image maker, and I suppose you can still be an image maker and do it typographically or photographically or whatever. But as an illustrator, I would say people who want to go into those, I think in most areas, it's very much about drawing for me. I think if you come to an art college, and most traditional art colleges, and I think it's still important, it's observation and drawing. I think as designers, as whether we're working on product design, whether we're working with technologies that are going to help people drive their cars better or use a better kettle or a more effective kettle, I think it's very much about understanding what people need. And to me, technology can do it, but again, the process comes in. That without that process of research, of talking to people, of trying things out, of looking where you're going, the technology is still only tools. They're still tools. That it's your brain that's the hero in everything.
So if I understand correctly, your idea is that the students should not rely on the technology and rely on themselves and their work with the simplest tools and with the other people.
Yeah, and also I think it's life experience. I think your ideas, your concepts come from understanding the people that you're designing for, that you're doing things for. It is not for you. You know, I think students think that it's very precious for them. It isn't. You know, it isn't for you. You've got an audience. If you want to do something that is just for you, go and be a fine artist, you know, and just paint and, you know, have your work in a gallery or whatever. If you're in any of the design communication, social science sort of things, you're working to improve society. You're working to create better books. You're working to challenge yourself and challenge people in how they look at work and how they, you know, experience creativity themselves. And I think that has to come from observation, research, experience, talking to people. It's not going to happen through a computer. You have to talk to people. You have to understand the problems. You have to have a empathy towards society and empathy towards whatever it is, whether it's the planet, people, old people, young people, because anything you do, you're doing it for a purpose, because otherwise, why are you doing it? You're not doing it just for yourself, you're doing it for something, and you're doing it in the best way that you can that will create satisfaction for you that you've achieved something that you think is good, but that's not the primary thing. The primary thing is it achieves its goals in what you wanted it to be. And when you take it out and you test it, the satisfaction is it works.
Thank you so much for the message.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for your time. It's been
you're
a
welcome.
great pleasure
It's all
to
right.
talk to you.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you as well. And thank you very much
thank you very much,
allowing me this opportunity to
Thank you for
do
being
this.
here, and thank you for doing these amazing workshops.
It's all right.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much. Thank you.